C-11, an act to amend the Copyright Act. I'm pleased to welcome the Honourable Pierre Poilievre, PC Member of Parliament for Carleton, Ontario, House of Commons. Mr. Poilievre, I understand the subject of this legislation has been a passion of yours for some time, and you have been working tirelessly in this regard. Thank you for appearing with us today, and please proceed if you have opening remarks, and after that we'll go to a question and answer session.
Thank you very much, Senator, and committee for including me here today. The reason for my presence is that I was the Employment and Social Development Minister when this bill was previously introduced in the last Parliament by my colleague, the Honourable James Moore. He was the Industry Minister, but of course there's policy overlap given the portfolio I represented at the time. I've since been a champion of the bill from the opposition benches. And I'd like to thank Minister Baines, Qualtrough, Reverend Dr. Rob Oliphant, Member of Parliament for Don Valley West, who have all championed this bill, and it has been a collaborative effort among us to bring it to this stage and before you today. Now, some of the members of the committee might wonder why a rock-ribbed free enterprise conservative is interested in this particular bill. I want to tell you why I encourage people who share my outlook on the world but are in the Senate to quickly pass this legislation. The reason is that normally with legislation that is designed to help one group, we end up imposing costs on everybody else. Any program that spends tax dollars must collect those dollars from the people who work to earn them in the first place. And as Winston Churchill said, a country trying to tax itself to prosperity is like a man trying to pull himself off the ground by standing in a bucket and pulling up on the handle. But this bill is unique and different in the sense that it will give a quarter of a billion blind people around the world access to 250,000 additional books at no extra cost to taxpayers or to the user. Chairman, if this seems to defy the laws of physics, that is because it does, in a sense. We're no longer dealing with the traditional laws of physics in the modern digital economy. It used to be, Chairman, if you had one book and I had one book and we traded, we still each had one book. But in the digital world, if we each have a digital copy and we share one with the other, we each have two books. And that is the awesome power of multiplication that this bill harnesses. Countries that accede to the treaty amend their copyright laws to allow the visually impaired and groups that serve them to make a copy of an accessible book, in audio for example, and share those copies within and across borders. A book recorded in London, England becomes available to a blind reader in London, Ontario, and vice versa. That is important because the blind suffer from what has been called a book drought, wherein only 7% or less of publications are available in an accessible format. In adopting this treaty and the legislation that implements it, we will avail to Canada's visually impaired over 270,000 books and publications produced abroad. Basically, we'll be removing a legal barrier that will allow those books to flow into our country. And simultaneously, books produced here in Canada, for example, in the Don Valley location of this Canadian National Institute of the Blind, will then become available to the visually impaired all around the world. Now, Senator Black and Massacott raised some important questions. I'm a big defender of property rights. I view them not only as essential for our economy, but foundational for civilization itself. And the reason we have copyright, a form of property rights, is because no one will pay for something they can get free. But the minister, I believe, has designed this bill carefully to avoid the free rider problem. It is true that no one will pay for something they can get free, but we're talking about books that the reader cannot get at all. They are not currently available in accessible formats. So it is not as though we will be foregoing a sale because a book is available over here, but I'll get it over here for free of charge. The book is not currently available over here, and that's why the treaty avails it to me as a notionally a visually impaired reader. And if the publisher or the creator makes the decision to produce the publication in an accessible format, then the copyright exemption no longer applies. The result is, as you pointed out, Chair, in your question, this bill actually creates a new incentive for the publishers and the creators to do the right thing and make these products available to the visually impaired. And in so doing, they will profit, of course, because we're talking about 250 million people around the world, an enormous market, and one that will give impetus over time, we hope, to more commercially available products of this kind. But in the meantime, that should not stop us from moving ahead with a treaty that will fill the gap that currently exists in publications around the world. And if you have any doubts about the importance of this bill, you need only heed the words of the CEO of the World Blind Union, Penny Harton, who said here in Ottawa just the other day, this is the biggest development for literacy for the blind since Braille was invented. If we adopt this treaty and ratify it through passage through your chamber before summer, we will be the 18th country to do so, and that will bring us to the brink of the magic number 20, upon which the treaty takes broad effect. Doing so, Mr. Chair, would be a welcome rain breaking the drought for many deserving book lovers around the world who suffer through no fault of their own from print disabilities. I encourage you to work together in order to see that that is achieved before we rise for the summer. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Poilievre. And just a quick update on what's happening in the Senate chamber right now. So 9 senators have spoken. The lists of senators apparently keep changing. It's still a long time to go. And so I don't think we're going to have a problem. So just to update you so you don't have any anxiety whatsoever, Senator Enverga. So questions, I have Senator Black and then Senator Enverga. Any more want to be added to the list? Senator Black.
First of all, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much for your initiative on this. As I think we heard from the last panel, I think we all accept that this is a policy, a social policy initiative, and I think it's commendable. And I think you've picked up the tenor of this room that I will be surprised if we don't think it's. But I think it's important that we recognize that there are costs. And I just wanted to test a couple things with you, if I could.
Sure.
You indicated in your comments that there is no cost to the visually challenged, and there is no cost to government. But you would agree with me that there is clearly a cost to somebody around this policy, and that somebody would be the publishers. And you would agree with that. I'm not saying that's good or bad, but that's the reality. Do you agree?
I don't agree.
Okay.
The reason that I don't agree is because the minister has drafted the bill in such a way to create an exemption for publishers, published materials that are already available at a reasonable price in accessible formats. So if a publisher has produced Harry Potter's works, and those are available at a comparable price to that they would be for the rest of the public, then the reader would be expected to pay the market price. It is only in instances where the publisher would not be selling the product anyway. So we're not foregoing, the publisher is not foregoing revenue they would otherwise enjoy. There would otherwise have been no transaction because the product is non-existent.
I agree with that. But there is, in order to produce a product which is now existent, there's a cost.
The production of the accessible format will not be borne by the publisher. It will be borne by nonprofits like the CNIB. But those costs already
That's
exist
helpful. That's
because
helpful.
we already fund, the government of Canada already funds CNIB to maintain recording studios and pay voice talent and produce digital formats of Braille and large print. So those costs are already existent. What I said in my remarks is that there are no additional costs to the availability of this 270,000 books that will be traveling across
this
and
is
within
helpful.
borders.
It's very helpful.
Yeah, so thank you.
The second question is, and this is from my understanding, let's take the Harry Potter series. If the UK does not sign on to the Marrakesh Treaty, would those books be available?
That is a good question. I think that's a question that we would have to ask.
My guess would be no.
My
guess would be no.
The UK has signed on already.
Have they? Are they they're going to be a signatory?
They are a signatory now. The question is whether they will be a ratifying party, and that remains.
And that was the genesis of my question around the G7, because the great publishers in the world are the UK and the
Right.
US, and if they're outside this agreement, there's less value to it, obviously.
That dealt with that, the minister
Was there?
addressed it. Yeah, I think that it just says here, currently an author's nationality restricts exports of accessible material, only a Canadian, etc. Now they've said that whatever country has kind of launched that effort will be allowed to do it. Yeah.
Okay. I
That's
don't know how
that's
they'll
what
do
it
that,
is.
but
I don't
great.
know either.
Thanks for, I appreciate your answers.
I think, Senator Black, we can't control what others do. We can only control what we do.
Oh, no, I agree, just so
So-
I understand how effective this is
Yeah,
going to be.
so that's what we'll try and do, and then we'll see what happens. Anything else you'd like, any other questions? Oh, sorry, and Senator Verga.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, thank you, Pierre, for coming here today. I understand that this is sort of your baby on the previous government.
I would say James Moore was the lead.
Was the lead, okay? And
I was the second fiddle because I was in a related ministry at the time.
I mean, during that time, I know you have some inkling on how it's going to look like on our on behalf of Canadians. But my question is this the bill that you have envisioned it to be at this time? I mean, do you think this is the bill that you want to be passed, or according to if you were the minister back then?
It is. I think the minister, the present minister, and the present government have drafted it with the appropriate exceptions, and have, I think, addressed some of the legitimate concerns about preserving and protecting copyright. So yeah, I think if we were in government, it would today you would see a very similar bill before the upper chamber today.
Great, thank you.
Okay, with that, if there are no further questions, thank you very much, Mr. Poilievre, and we're going to suspend for a couple